One is absolutely the huge technology background, the kind of mind we have in the South, the people all over the world, people look at the technology hub and the technology source from India. Number two is the infrastructure. Not even 10% infrastructure has been made. So 90% infrastructure, any country, whether the Lincoln to now, it is the infrastructure which a catalyst to start the economy. And number two, India has a tremendous base of natural resources. Whether it's oil, whether it's gold, whether it's copper, whether it's iron ore, and it is not even 2% has been explored yet. So with this too, when the economy open up, I feel that it will accelerate much more.
Okay, if I could come to you, Mr. Rana Kapoor, let's assume that policymakers do no wrong, in some sense, or at least there will be no self-goals, as they say in Hindi, ummeed pe duniya kayam hai. So let's assume that things are on track on the policy front. What is the one thing that you think needs to be done over the medium term to ensure that India gets to that $10 trillion mark by 2030, like you pointed out?
So what Anandji has said is fabulous, but the fact of the matter is that we have to take steps short, medium, long. In the short term, we have taken many significant steps in terms of very stratospheric changing reforms. I need not elaborate on that. And I think these reforms have to now become fundamental to the execution of the economy's future success. Secondly, we have to recognize that the jobs in India and the skills in India are fundamentally created in the micro, small, medium enterprises end of the pyramid of the jobs, and that is the job pyramid which is fundamentally the most important in our nation. It's 1.25, 1.5 billion in future. The jobs are going to be created there. So the skilling sets, as Dominic said very brilliantly in his speech a little while ago, that the fundamental aspect is to create the skills there. And I think the third aspect is, like Anilji said, that the infrastructure opportunity is like, on the anvil. I think we are doing a good job of some sectors like roads and all. I think we can do fantastic on transportation and logistics. Right. I think we can do even more brilliantly given a head start on renewable energy. This 175 gigawatts, which seem to be a moving challenge, but today I think is very feasible and at a lucrative rate as long as there is proper legal conformance and proper, statutory conformance to the pricing, regulations. Right. So I am deeply convinced that the Indian economy is on a threshold of 10% CAGR between now and 2025. And from 2025, if we can build that momentum to 2030, because we have to be technical on these points, that it needs a CAGR of 12% thereafter to get to a 10 trillion economy. And I'm deeply convinced it can happen.
10% CAGR. I mean, I hope everyone in this room is... Of course, I understand nominal. I hope everyone...
That's easy, huh?
That's a little easier, assuming inflation isn't too high. Okay, let me come to you, Bob, and that's an important aspect to talk about because you've been betting on India for a while. You've been investing in India for some years now with stakes in Make My Trip and Flipkart. Tell us, what is it that you are so bullish about when it comes to India? Is it the market size? Is it the demographic dividend? What is it that makes you so bullish about India?
Yeah, so many of the points that Dominic actually mentioned are the drivers of what makes us excited. So the number of people that will be migrating into the middle class in India is a stunning number. But there's one number that gets us even more excited. So we started investing in the Indian market in earnest in 2008. We were actually here in Delhi in our internet conference 2008. And at the time, India had about 10 million internet users, this is a decade ago, which was the same as Holland, population 16 million. So it's a country 70 times bigger, same internet market. 5 years ago, again, we had a big internet gathering here. India was at about roughly 30 to 40 million internet users. Market the size of France, right? Less than the 20th of the population of India. Now, today, India is between 300 and 400 million, depending on which metric you want to look at, internet users, comparable to nothing, right? It's bigger than the US. It's still obviously not as big as China, but it's the second largest internet market in the world, and it's gotten there in a period of 3-4 years fundamentally. And besides that, presenting probably the most exciting transformational internet growth opportunity in history, it also, what we've seen in China, which was tremendous for us, but also for China, is that explosive growth drives new innovation. It drives innovation that wouldn't happen elsewhere. It leads to leapfrogs, and I think the innovations that will come out of India that will actually be new to the rest of the world, that is what I'm really excited about. It's happened in China, I'm sure it will happen in India.
It's happened in China, so it should happen in India. Dominic, since you spoke at length about why you're bullish in India, I want to ask you about what could be a risk. And people often talk about the execution risk, and that's a concern you've flagged. And you know, as a consultant, it's only, a strategy can be very good, but if the execution isn't good, it's not going to have any impact. So how big a risk is that when we talk of a $10 trillion journey, that we get the execution wrong?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with what's being said with the digitization and also the speed, as you said. But I don't think things aren't going to be nice. You could have things pop out in the digital side. So just want to say I'm very bullish on that. But on execution, what I worry more about is consistency. That we know what we need to do. If a new government comes in at some point down the road, let's not change you got to have consistency. I think that's really important for infrastructure, because people, if they want to invest in infrastructure, they want to know that there's going to be a consistency in the regulatory approach and how pricing is done. If we're going to, if you're going to think about the rules and how decisions get made, you got to have consistency. And I would also argue one thing we can learn from what's going on in the United States right now is I think all of us, at least I did, we underestimated the impact that deregulation had on economic growth there. And it is, whether you like it or not and how that's working, it has led to growth. And so one of the things I would be looking at in India, how can we get decisions done faster? I would have a clock speed. Why does it take so long to make an infrastructure decision, whatever decision? I think there should be measures out there on speed. Because when it isn't out there, then there can be all sorts of reasons, and that's a competitive advantage. You'll get more capital, you'll get more innovation. I think you can unleash more people. So the key to me is the kind of the consistency of policy, if you will, and then measuring this clock speed of how decisions get made.
Bill, if I could come to you, what are going to be the key catalysts of change? If you look at the next 5-10 year horizon, is it going to be a combination of the economy making this whole digital transition and GST and the upside that we could get on account of these two factors? Is that going to be the key catalyst of change according to you?
I think the catalyst of change is going to come from the consistency that Dom talked about. I mean, at the end of the day, the opportunity is there. If the reforms continue to make India more open for business, that will create economic growth in a continuing increasing pace. But I think the real catalyst of change is going to come when you recognize that educating the population of incredibly talented people that you have in this country is, if we solve that, then 10 trillion, I think, is in reach. And the reason why is because you've got to open up, the country is not going to get there by itself. So it has to be open to the world in terms of economic flows. But the world will come here to access that talent if it's accessible. And I think that is the real catalyst for change.
Saran Agarwal, on GST, we all know and we've all spoken at length about how transformational it is. But when will the upside of GST be visible to the economy? When will it be visible in corporate balance sheets? The upside that we've spoken about for months and years now, when is it going to show in the real economy and in corporate balance sheets, according to you?
I think it is showing. You can't expect overnight anything to happen. It has to settle down. The government, the public, the way we do business is transforming. And it's the question of time. There is no question in the world anybody will say that GST is not the right thing. But if you look at India, if you look at, is a place of entrepreneur. There is a lot of similarity between US and India. India has grown because of the entrepreneurship. India, if you look at all the socialist country, they run by the government. The companies, the business run by the government. Most of the democratic country is the business run by the entrepreneur, the private. The government look at the governance. And India is moving in that direction. At the moment, it's like a khichdi. You know, this has to be resolved. The Indian entrepreneur has tremendous capability in India. Anything which they have trusted on, they have delivered. Whether it is a telecom, whether it is a steel, whether it is an airport, port, anything, the moment the government entrusted them, see the kind of world-class capacity they built. So this is the one thing that has to be recognized, that India is a place for entrepreneur. I'll give you the smallest example. The ONGC. ONGC today market cap is $30 billion. If it has been privatized, it will be $300 billion. I'll give you the example. Hindustan Zinc, when we bought, the market cap was 2,000 crore. Today, in 10 years' time, is 2 lakh crore. Same company. And it is run by the same people. We have to understand the DNA of India. India DNA is very similar. It's a democratic country. It is the DNA of entrepreneur. Right. And the more entrepreneurship comes, you will see how the GST is the right direction, demonetization is, at least there is a prime minister who take a decision.
Right. Okay. Mr. Kapoor, if I could come to you, and you know, I like the part that you said in your speech on how there needs to be this genetic transformation when it comes to entrepreneurs. We speak a lot about ease of doing business and not enough about way of doing business. Has way of doing business changed, and does it need to change more in corporate India for us to get to this $10 trillion? Because what's happened over the last 2-3 years is also a formalization of the economy on account of some of these reforms that Mr. Agarwal spoke about as well. Does it necessitate a change in the way of doing business?
So what Anil just said now is like you're evangelizing the potential of the economy, right? Number one. Number two, we have to understand that deep within the economy, there are a lot of choked assets, right, which are going through a little bit of turbulence through new regulation. And because of the regulation, there are speed breakers, and now they will transit into productive capacity. So India is the most beautiful country in the whole world, in my opinion, on a buy versus build opportunity. No, really. And number three, what I like to believe is that the consumption demand, which is practically permanent, right? I don't have to spell that out. It's a permanent demand. How do you convert that with investment in capital formation, which is where India has been a little hesitant, has been on pause. It's happened in, like I mentioned earlier, in the auto sector, in two-wheelers and many other sectors. But India must now make bold decisions, industrialists must make bold decisions to recognize that there is a very sweet spot in the economy. Right now with global tailwinds, please remember India has precipitated as an economy for the last 10 years and the best part of the last 7 years because of headwinds of global economics, right? So we could not export, we could not even import intelligently and oil, whatever. The point is today you have a global economy which is growing, as was stated only last month, at 3.9%. Right. So when mature economies and with the whatever $20 trillion base and on grow at 3.9%, that creates a lot of tailwinds for India to tap. I think India's automatic story, unless we put a bullet through our own foot, अपने पाँव पे कुल्हाड़ी मारेंगे तो बात अलग है. तो मुझे जैसा लग रहा है कि we can do wonders in getting back to a 9% growth story at most in the next 1.5 years.
Since you spoke about private investment, I have to ask Mr. Agarwal before I come to the rest of the panel. You know, are you seeing early signs of revival in private investment activity? Why is it that corporate India isn't still putting its money where its mouth is?
No, they have a tremendous capacity to risk-taking. I can tell you one thing for sure. It is all about taking the risk. And I think the government, the Indian entrepreneurs are definitely, they are definitely looking how the government policies are changing, how things are settling. It's very important the way Prime Minister Modi, every day I'm seeing his speech, he's talking about, taking away the bureaucracy, as mentioned that the
UP
red
and
carpet.
Maharashtra also.
Yeah, everywhere he said,
Everywhere.
we have red carpet, not less bureaucracy. It is showing a way. There is no question the amount of talent. If you go to California, the maximum startup is by the Indians. The maximum startup is by Indians. Why not in India? It will happen. We have the Niti Aayog, Deputy Chairman here. These are very, very important. They are participating. And I 100% believe things will change.
Okay, you were just speaking about Silicon Valley and startups, and we just had Dara walk in almost at the same time. But let me turn to you, Dominic, and again, you touched upon it on the demographic dividend, and I'm trying to just try and put it in perspective. In India, we're looking at about 120 million people are estimated to join the workforce over the next 10 years. That's about 20% of our of our current workforce. How big an upside is that going to give in terms of to India from a long-term growth potential?
It's a humongous upside, because remember, the biggest driver of productivity growth is labor participation. As I said, most OECD countries are seeing the exact opposite. So there's a massive headwind that's coming their way. They've had a tailwind for 50 years. It's now a huge headwind. But the key is educating them, is skilling the people, right? And this is where I said, it was interesting with the Coursera discussion too, which I very much agree, and others are building businesses in these areas too. We can train people in 3 months to get jobs. We don't have to send them away for 2 years or 3 years to do it. So I think we have to rethink, if we're going to do conventional education on that scale, just forget it. I don't think it's going to work. But that's okay. Let's rethink how we do it, and then have people move in the system. And again, I think companies are going to play a big part of that. Well, one example I've used is, AT&T, Randall Stevenson, who's a hardcore capitalist, said, 40% of my people will not have the skills to do what's needed in 5 years, just given, and there's 280,000 people, 40. He developed a online training program with Georgia Tech, Udacity. It's part-time, so mid-career people can do it. And he just did it. He didn't wait for someone to tell him to do it. He just built it, and it works. And so I just think we have to do that. And but the benefit of that, I don't know what that works out to into exact GDP numbers, but all I do know is it's huge.
Right. Yeah. Important. Bob, the other opportunity, of course, is to talk about the e-commerce space. And how big is the e-commerce opportunity to your mind over the next decade or so? In 2017, e-commerce sales were around the $15 billion mark. Can it touch $200 billion in the next 10 years? Are we looking at that kind of growth in e-commerce in India?
I think we'll get there a whole lot quicker than that, actually. So there's a few numbers to look at. So currently, e-commerce penetration as a percent of overall retail in India stands at 3 to 4%. Now, if you look, so the global benchmark is probably where the UK is at around 18, 19%. The catch-up that a market like China has made, I believe India is on the verge of, they went from sub 10 to 17 in 5 years' time. So if India can get to 15% internet penetration in 5 years, that is, I think you'll be talking about a 10x rather than the order of magnitude. And I think there's another really important factor that we think about when we think about e-commerce in India, is that if you look at structured retail as a percentage of total retail, it's one of the lowest in the world in India, right? So that means that when very large e-commerce businesses like Flipkart come to scale, I think they will take a bigger role in the lives of the average Indian than they even would do in sort of Western economies. So I think the opportunity, it's hard to overstate the size of the opportunity in e-commerce. I think it's a 10x in 10 years.
10x in 10 years, that's incredibly optimistic. Bill, I can't not ask you about the one story that's sort of gripped the headlines over the last few days, which is of course the fraud with one of the PSU banks. Do incidents like this hurt our attractiveness as an investment destination when a banking fraud hits a developing economy, exposes the weaknesses in the banking system, in the audit framework in the country? do they hurt our attractiveness as an investment destination?
Well, I certainly feel like when this happens, it's how the country responds and what the response is that makes the difference. And I think recognizing sort of the how and the why, sort of understanding what exactly went wrong, how did it happen, and ensuring that every single party involved recognizes that trust in the capital markets is of critical importance to the growth of the country, frankly, the growth of any country. Mm-hmm. I think that has to be front and center in terms of the next little while in terms of questions that are asked. But trust is going to be essential to drive the growth that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kapoor, I have to ask you.
I want to make one point on what he said, mm-hmm. that every problem can be solved through reconciliation and not through media aggression.
Mm-hmm. But as an ace banker, sir, Mr. Agarwal spoke about it as well. Should the government take this opportunity to liberalize the banking space further? He spoke about how, privatization. Is it time to look at, a privatization of PSU banks, improve governance there? Do you think this is an opportunity for that, for reforms in that direction?
I have a very strong belief that the private sector in India naturally performs better than a more subdued public sector system. At the same time, public sector system are public utilities. So you can't unwind them so quickly. Nobody understands what's happened. The fiscal dispensation of India in the quantitative easing that happened in the global crisis in 2008, 9 and 10 happened through the public sector banking system.
Right.
So you cannot change the plates so easily because the government did not have the Uncle Sam kind of proposition. The Reserve Bank of India had only blessings of giving soft interest rates. But the fundamental aspect is that you cannot change so easily. So my personal view is that the government banks have to survive and there has to be a proper forced ranking of the ones that can survive and the others that need to amalgamate and the others that need to demise.
Sure.
But the public utility, public aspect of these banks in catering to national India cannot be taken away. It's not an easy decision. Okay, it's like MTNL and BSNL. It's like Air India.
They serve a strategic purpose. That's a fair point.
They're strategically mission critical, right?
Okay, closing comments. We're running out of time. I want to start with you. Mr. Rana Kapoor started off by saying $10 trillion by 2030. He's got his eyes set on 2030. Mr. Agarwal, when do you see us getting to $10 trillion mark? And I'm going to ask this to the entire panel.
I can talk about my subject. I'm a natural resource person. India cannot live importing 85% of oil. We have a $70 billion worth of reserve. I produce 30% oil of the country. I produce the sweet crude. I produce a low sulfur crude. And I believe that India should have at least 20, 30, 40 companies to come and produce oil. Every company come from the foreign, want to set up the refinery. Every company want and set up the petrochemical. I produce oil at $6. I want the economy to revive. Fundamental, it is your energy. Right. Number two, the natural resource. We import 100% of gold. We have the best patch of gold, copper, iron ore, right. Anything you talk about, these has to be processed in India. Aluminum. And these thousands of SMEs has to develop. The startup has to come. McKinsey people are here. They will confirm the kind of talent which we have. The banking system, everything will revive the moment you revive SMEs. And right. This SMEs, one is the technology, other is to start up this manufacturing. Even if you see the automobile, there are 50 parts required of aluminum, in aluminum. Right. And these parts being imported. This has to be manufactured here. Okay. Important thing is the quality.
Okay. So 30 seconds to each one of you. By when will we get to $10 trillion? 2030, before that, after that?
Yeah, so I'll say if you continue to harness the entrepreneurial spirit of the population and continue on the journey to open up the country for business, I think you'll get there before 2030.
Before 2030, that's a very optimistic, Bob.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you.
It's going to be tough for you to say after 2030 now.
I'm actually similarly optimistic, and the thing that makes me really excited is I think India is on the way to build a real domestic technology innovation capability. Unlike Europe, which I think is actually a digital colony of the US in many ways. So if India can avoid becoming a digital colony and really have an ecosystem of tremendous entrepreneurs, decision makers and leaders here, I think they can accelerate every business, and you'll get there in 28.
Digital colony of the West. I've got questions on that for my next guest as well, but Dominic, by when do you think we'll get to $10 trillion?
I think we should set a target of 2030. I see no reason why you can't. I mean, we used to be shocked and awed when the tiger economies grew at 6 to 7%. We thought that was a shocker. Well, who says that has to be the case? And I think I go back to the demographics. I go back to what we're seeing on the e-commerce side, and it sounds like other things that we can unleash. I think it would be shameful if we're not ambitious. It's shameful for all those people. Let's be ambitious and let it rip.
I want to add one more, sister. If we get to this 10 trillion, you know what happens? So today our per capita, which is $1,709, catapults to $6,600. The demand for India, that means food, agriculture, education, healthcare, you name it, every product in India for the next 12 to 13 years is going to be in tremendous demand. So this is the best consumption, best investment, best capital formation economy in the world today.
And you can't dispute that. And for the benefit of, there's someone's done it in the past. China moved from $2.5 trillion in 2003 to $11 billion in 2017. So they've done it. Why can't we? On that optimistic note, I'm going to wrap this panel. Thank you so much to this wonderful panelists. Please give a big round of applause for our wonderful panel here this evening as we debate India's journey to the $10 trillion mark. Thank you so much, sir.